Nkem sat under the udala tree, watching children play. She smiled faintly, but her heart was heavy. Her barren state had become the topic of endless gossip in Omaaka. Each time she walked through the village, she could feel eyes on her and hear the whispers. Her mother-in-law, Nwanyioma, made things worse. What use is a woman who cannot bear children? She often shouted, loud enough for the entire village to hear. Nkem's husband, Obinna, loved her but struggled to defend her against his mother's constant taunts. Nkem prayed fervently to the gods for a child. She performed every ritual the village priest prescribed, but nothing worked. One night, as she cried by the stream, an old woman approached her. If you truly want a child, go to the river goddess Nwanyioma. The woman whispered and disappeared. Desperate, Nkem waited until dawn to gather her courage. She left home quietly, clutching a clay pot of palm oil, a white cloth, and some kola nuts as offerings. The villagers believed Nwanyioma was a powerful goddess who granted wishes but demanded strict obedience. Nkem reached the river, trembling as she called out, Nwanyioma, great goddess, hear my plea. The water rippled, and the beautiful woman with flowing hair emerged. Her voice was soft but commanding. Why do you summon me, mortal? Nkem fell to her knees. Great goddess, I want a child. Please grant me this gift. Nwanyioma studied her. I can give you a daughter, but she will not be entirely of this world. You must keep a sacred vow to protect her secrets. Do you accept? Without hesitation, Nkem agreed. Months after Nkem's visit to the river goddess, she felt a change in her body. Her stomach began to swell, and the women in the village whispered in disbelief. Could it be that Nkem is with child? They murmured. Her mother-in-law scoffed. It's probably a sickness. Let us wait and see. But Nkem knew this was no sickness. She carried the promise of the goddess, and when the time came, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. The child was named Amarachi, meaning God's grace. For the first time in years, Nkem felt the warmth of joy. Even her husband Obinna wept tears of gratitude. But Nkem kept the goddess warning close to her heart. Amarachi was not entirely of this world. As Amarachi grew, her beauty captivated everyone. Her skin glowed like the morning sun, and her laughter was like music. The villagers marveled at her, but soon strange rumors began to spread. Some claimed they saw her by the river, talking to no one. Others said the child's eyes sparkled unnaturally under the moonlight. Nwanyioma, though proud to have a grandchild, was suspicious. There is something strange about that girl, she whispered to Obinna. But Obinna dismissed her concerns. You have always had something against Nkem. Leave her and the child alone. Nkem lived in quiet fear. She knew the villagers' curiosity could lead to questions she wasn't ready to answer. She avoided conversations about Amarachi's origin and prayed daily to Nwanyioma to keep their secret hidden. One sunny afternoon, Nkem noticed Amarachi was missing. She searched the compound, calling her name, but there was no response. Panic gripped her heart as she ran to the river. There by the water's edge, she found Amarachi, her feet in the water, staring blankly. Amarachi, Nkem cried, pulling her back. The child blinked and smiled as though nothing had happened. Mama, the river sings to me, she said, pointing at the ripples. Nkem's blood ran cold. She remembered the goddess' warning. Amarachi was not entirely human. This was the first time Amarachi disappeared, but it would not be the last. Each time she vanished, Nkem grew more afraid, knowing the villagers might begin to suspect the truth. As Amarachi's disappearance became more frequent, the villagers grew more curious. They began to whisper behind Nkem's back, wondering why the child would vanish only to return with a distant look in her eyes. Some said she was a spirit sent to torment Nkem, while others speculated that Nkem had made a pact with dark forces. Nwanyioma, fueled by her suspicions, approached Nkem one afternoon as she was tending to the garden. "That girl of yours," she said in a low voice. "I see her by the river. You can't fool me. There is something wrong with her. You have been to the river goddess, haven't you?" Nkem froze. Her heart pounded in her chest. She tried to laugh it off. "Mama, you are just imagining things. Amarachi is a child like any other." But her mother-in-law's piercing gaze told her that she was not convinced. Nkem could no longer ignore the growing fear in her heart. One night, she returned to the river, praying that Nwanyioma would guide her. The river goddess appeared as she had before, her voice both gentle and stern. "Why have you come, Nkem?" Nwanyioma asked. Nkem knelt at the river's edge. "Great goddess, my daughter disappears. The villagers are beginning to notice. What do I do?" The goddess' eyes flashed with an airy glow. "Your daughter is an ogbanje child, a child who is born to die and return. If you break the vow and reveal her secrets, you will suffer greatly. Keep her safe and continue to honor our agreement." Nkem bowed her head, trembling. "I will do whatever it takes, but please do not let her suffer." The goddess' voice softened. "You must protect her, Nkem, but remember, the price of seeking a child from the river is high. You will face many trials." One day, disaster struck. The village main stream, which had always provided water for drinking and farming, began to dry up. People were confused and angry. What is happening? Why is the water disappearing? The village elders gathered in a council meeting, and suspicion quickly turned towards Nkem. "The child of the river goddess must be responsible," one elder said. "A curse has befallen us because of her." Nkem's heart sank. She knew it wouldn't be long before the villagers turned on her. They had seen Amarachi near the water too many times, and now the drought has begun. Nkem realized that the goddess' gift had come with a heavy cost, one that she might not be able to bear. The tension in the village reached its peak. One evening, Nkem was summoned to the village square. There, the elders and the villagers gathered, ready to confront her. Nwanyioma stood at the front, her face twisted with anger. "Enough of your lies, Nkem," she shouted. "We have seen your child. She is not of this world. What kind of wickedness have you brought upon us?" Nkem tried to defend herself, but her words were drowned out by the chorus of accusation. "She has cursed us," they said. "She has summoned evil spirits." Tears welled up in Nkem's eyes as she looked at her daughter, who stood silently beside her. She knew the villagers didn't understand, and worse, they were beginning to turn on her. That night, Nkem went to the river again, hoping for guidance from Nwanyioma. She had never felt so desperate. When the goddess appeared, her face was cold. You have broken your vow, Nkem, Nwanyioma said. You have allowed your secrets to be exposed. There will be consequences. Nkem begged for mercy. Please, great goddess, spare my daughter. I never meant for anyone to suffer. But Nwanyioma was firm. Your daughter is an ogbanje. She must return to the river or face death. You can no longer hide her. The balance has been disturbed. Nkem's heart shattered. She didn't want to lose her daughter, but she knew the goddess' words were final. She prayed for strength to face the village wrath, but it felt like her world was falling apart. The next morning, Nkem walked with Amarachi to the river, her heart heavy with sorrow. Amarachi, she whispered, the goddess says you must return to the river. It is the only way to keep you safe. Amarachi looked up at her mother with wide, innocent eyes. I don't want to go, Mama, she said softly. The river calls to me, but I want to stay with you. Nkem felt a lump in her throat, but she knew what had to be done. She hugged her daughter tightly and whispered, I will always love you, my child, no matter where you are. As she led Amarachi to the water's edge, the river seemed to glow with a strange energy. Nkem could feel the pull of the goddess, urging her to let go. With one final kiss, Nkem released her daughter to the embrace of the river. Nkem watched in agony as the river swallowed her daughter. Amarachi's small figure disappeared beneath the waves, and Nkem's heart broke. She fell to her knees, weeping uncontrollably. Why, Nwanyioma? Why must I lose her? The river was silent, the air heavy with sorrow. Nkem stayed by the water, unable to tear herself away. She stayed there for hours until her body ached with fatigue and her tears had dried up. Slowly, she rose to her feet and returned to the village, empty-handed and broken. As Nkem walked through the villagers stared at her with judgmental eyes. They knew the child had vanished and Nkem's reputation, already damaged, was now completely shattered. The whispers began again. She has lost the favor of the goddess, they said. The river has taken what was never hers to keep. Days passed and the village seemed to grow colder towards Nkem. They believed the river goddess had claimed her child and that Nkem had failed in some ways. But then one morning, as Nkem walked in the garden, she heard a voice call her name. Nkem, Mama. She turned to find Amarachi standing before her. Her clothes were soaked, her hair wild, but she was alive. Nkem gasped, rushing to her daughter's side. Amarachi, how are you here? You were gone. The child smiled softly, but there was something different in her eyes. I came back, Mama. The river let me return. I am still here, but I belong to both worlds now. Nkem felt both relief and fear. She had been told that ogbanje children were spirits who came and went, born to die and return. But seeing Amarachi standing there, alive and speaking, filled Nkem with confusion and dread. Nkem could not shake the feeling of dread that settled in her chest. Every night, Amarachi would vanish again, only to return a few days later. Each time, she looked more like a spirit than a child. Her eyes seemed distant, and her laughter, though sweet, had an airy tone. The villagers began to notice the strange changes. They saw Amarachi walking near the river, talking to herself, and sometimes they swore they saw her disappear completely before reappearing in the village. Rumors spread faster than wildfire. That child is not of this world. She is a cursed being, born of evil. Mami Joma was the first to confront Nkem. What have you done? She demanded. You have brought disaster to us all. That child is a curse, and we cannot live in peace with her here. Nkem's heart sank. She knew her mother's in-laws' words were not the end. The village would soon demand answers. One evening, the village elders called for a council meeting. Nkem was summoned to explain the situation. The tension in the air was thick. The elders looked at Nkem with disapproval, their faces grave. Mami Joma stood behind them, her eyes filled with contempt. Nkem, the village elder Okafor began, we have heard the rumors about your daughter. She has been seen disappearing into the river. We cannot let this evil plague our village. Nkem's heart raced as she tried to explain. She is my child. I never meant for any of this to happen. But the elders were not listening. You have brought misfortune to this village, and we must rid ourselves of this curse, one elder declared. Fear filled Nkem's heart as she realized what they meant. The villagers were preparing to exile her and her daughter. The decision was made quickly. The villagers could no longer tolerate Nkem's presence, nor Amarachi's mysterious disappearance. That night, a group of men came to Nkem's house, armed with torches and angry faces. Gather your things and leave, one of them commanded. You and your cursed child are no longer welcomed here. Nkem clutched Amarachi to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Where will we go? We have nowhere else. The men did not answer. They turned their backs and left, leaving Nkem standing alone with her daughter. In that moment, Nkem realized that she had lost everything: the village, the love of her husband, and her peace. All that remained was her daughter, who was slowly becoming something more than human. Nkem and Amarachi left the village the next day, walking down the dusty path towards the unknown. They did not know where they were going or what they would do, but Nkem was determined to protect her child. As they journeyed, Nkem found solace in the quiet of the forest. There she could hear the whispers of the trees and the calls of distant animals. But it was not enough to calm the fear that gnawed at her heart. Amarachi seemed more and more detached from her, as though she was already slipping away. Each day, Amarachi would vanish into the forest or near the river, only to return hours later with no memory of where she had been. Nkem could no longer deny the truth. Amarachi was an ogbanje, a child of the river who was born to the water, constantly torn between the mortal world and the spiritual realm. One night, as Nkem sat by a fire, she dreamt of Nwanyioma. The goddess appeared to her, her face glowing with an outwardly light. You have failed, Nkem, the goddess said. Your daughter's spirit is restless. She was never meant to stay in the human world for long. The balance must be restored. Nkem trembled in fear. Please, goddess, I don't know what to do. Amarachi needs me. The goddess' eyes softened. You have done what you could. Now you must return her to the river where she truly belongs. Only then will she find peace. Nkem awoke, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the time had come to let her daughter go once and more. The next morning, Nkem led Amarachi to the river. Her daughter was quieter than ever, her steps slow and hesitant. Mama, I don't want to leave, Amarachi said softly. Nkem kissed her forehead, tears streaming down her face. I know, my child, but you must return to the river. It is your true home. With a heavy heart, Nkem watched as her daughter stepped into the river one more time. This time, Nkem knew it was for good. As Amarachi disappeared beneath the water, Nkem felt a deep sense of peace. The river goddess had taken her daughter, but in doing so, she had returned the balance that had been disturbed. Nkem returned to the village, her heart broken, but somehow lighter. She had lost her daughter, but she had also set her free. Though the villagers had exiled her, Nkem knew in her heart that what she had done the right thing. The village would never understand the sacrifice she had made, but Nkem would carry the memory of Amarachi's brief life with her always. She had given everything to protect her daughter, and though the pain would never truly leave, Nkem knew that love could transcend even the greatest of trials. As she sat by the river, Nkem whispered, Goodbye, Amarachi. You will always be my grace, my child, my heart.